Hey everybody, this is going to serve as your chapter 3.1 lecture, and we're going to talk about politics and economic analysis. And this is going to be kind of our last foundational chapter for marketing and business, and then from here on out we get pretty heavy into actual, more of your traditional marketing concepts, things like research and promotion and pricing, more towards your 4 Ps that we've kind of talked about before. But this is a great chapter. It is pretty short, and I think it's kind of relevant. So today we're going to get through 3.1 and do some notes, and then hopefully I'm going to set the agenda for the next 2 days about story time, factors of productions. Your bell work question literally ties to what we're going to get to in a few minutes, so as you take notes, be sure to add that to your bell work at some point later today. So what is an economy? And these are a lot of the vocabulary that we're going to go through, and obviously I'm not going to address them now, but we'll address them as we go through. So our objectives for this lesson is explain the concept of what an economy is, how scarcity and the factors of production affect the economy, and then compare and contrast 3 different types of economies, and then I will add a 4th one in there and how they answer the 3 basic questions. And then we'll talk more about why economies are mixed and examples of different political and economic philosophies. So it seems like a lot there, but it's actually not that bad. A lot of it really ties together. So the heart of the matter is an economy is a country's way of making choices about how and what is made in the country, as well as who gets it and what is needed to actually make it. So this main idea of an economy is a nation's method for making economic choices that involve how it will use its resources to produce and get or move goods to meet the needs of its production. So vocabulary again, and what creates an economy? And here's your formal definition of economy: the organized way a nation provides needs and wants of its population. So an economy is everything, all factors of manufacturing, buying, selling, transporting, investing, and anything else that goes on where dollars are exchanged for work or for a product. That is all of that people do is part of the economy. So there's this concept of a circular economy where what we're doing is constantly going back into the economy. And you can think of someone made a soda can, right? And it was made at a production facility. Someone was in that facility, did something, and got it onto a truck. A truck driver drove it to a store. Someone at the store put it on a shelf. Someone bought it, and they drank it. It went into a can, hopefully to be recycled, was brought back somewhere else where it is then reused and recycled. And that is a simple method, but you need to think about along the way there was a truck driver, someone that made the can, someone that bought the can. They're all taking in money or giving money, and that money is constantly running in a circle. It's constantly going back into the economy. Even the guy that made it, right? He made it, and his job is to make that can, but at the same time he is getting paid, and he is going to take dollars that he got and put those dollars into buying something else. And someone at the store is ringing up someone else, and there's a manager and people stocking the shelves, and all of those people are going to get paid, and at some point or another they're going to take their paycheck and they're going to put it and buy something else. And that economy is constantly running in a circle. And yes, there is waste, but a lot of what happens and what we do gets reused and recycled, especially from an economic standpoint. So 2 terms here: factors of production and resources. Your factors of production are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, and they are what we use to make business actually happen and function. We talk about them as a form of economic resources, and they are all forms of our country's resources. We have land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And that's what makes our economy thrive so well, is some combination of all of those, right? And we'll get into that a little bit more. Just think of the resources are anything a country can use to actually make the economy function. Whether that is its people and their intelligence, that is a resource, or as an actual thing like lumber or iron or oil, anything else that can be created, produced, manufactured, and then sold. So here are those 4 definitions, and I know you guys got to fill this in, so I will give you some time to start working on that. But I will talk about each one as you guys are working. So land is that raw material that provides something to create, whether that's steel or wood or whatever commodity type thing that is. Your labor are the people that are working for you. This can include managers and professional people, but does not include the owners of the business. Those are entrepreneurs, and they are at the top of maybe the labor aspect, but they're the ones organizing. The risk is on them for losing or gaining in this whole adventure that their business is. And if you want to learn about entrepreneurship, we teach a separate class on that. It is a lot of fun, and we just kind of explore all the functions of owning a business. And then I will skip back to this one here, capital. Capital is the money and the buildings and the infrastructure that we need. A lot of that is also considered the heavy equipment. So if we were t-shirt makers, the t-shirt screen printing machine would be part of our capital. They use the word infrastructure here, and that might be a new word for you guys, but that is the physical roads, ports, utilities, internet, all of that stuff is infrastructure that makes an economy work more efficiently. It was a huge deal when this country had a railroad that ran all the way to California. That allowed us to move goods back and forth across this whole country, and allowed us to use much of the land of California in the West that had not been fully developed yet. So real quick, we'll compare labor and entrepreneurship again. So both require people. Labor refers to working. The guy that stands on the line and stamps the part time after time. He's the guy hitting the button. That's labor. Whereas the entrepreneur is the skill guy that got the machine and maybe hired the person and got him there to do the job and is working on continuing to grow and expand that business. Workforce is an economic resource, and so are ideas. Ideas and the people that go out there and execute them are also part of it. And there are always new ideas, right? Things like TikTok, Apple, always changing phones. Those ideas are critical to us moving forward. So another new term is scarcity. And scarcity is the difference between wants and needs of an available resource. And as that need goes up and the supply goes down, that scarcity increases and the price will go up with it. So that fact that there is a limited amount of steel that we can actually take out of the ground and work with every year forces the economy to have different priorities. And in our case, in the United States of America, we let the market decide what that is. And I'm just using a quick example. There is only so much gold that can be found, for example. So what do we use that gold for? This creates scarcity between the difference of that want and the need. So kind of switching gears real quick, there are 3 economic questions that a country has to answer. What, how, and for whom? What does that mean? So in our case, our three questions are answered by the market. This isn't always the case, and we'll get into that shortly. But consumers are the people that use things, and we decide what is going to be produced. If there is something that we don't like, we just don't buy it, and we let that company go out of business. Businesses decide how to produce it. They go about the function of figuring out, how are we going to get this done? Are we going to import t-shirts from another country? or are we going to make them ourselves? And then for whom? People with resources, the market, to buy, right? Those are the people that have the money and make that decision to actually do it. So the three economic questions: what to make, how do we make it, and for whom do we make it for? All right, so now we're going to get into market and command economies and then how they are similar. And then if I'm going too fast at any point, just slow me down. All right, so in a market economy, consumers decide what will be produced by their purchases, and then businesses decide how, and the possession of money decides who makes that purchase, right? Not everyone can buy a Maserati because not everybody has the money to do so. In a command economy, we're talking on the bottom here, this is all driven by the government. The government decides, hey, I'm going to do this. Well, we're going to do this, but this is what we're doing. I'm deciding how to produce and who gets what is produced. So, and don't get me wrong, that's not the way we're used to it and not the way we see the world. We feel like we should have all the choices. There are some positives to this command economy. It is super efficient. The government can one day decide that everyone gets a face mask. And they will go out and figure out the resources needed to get a face mask and execute it. The problem is they're not likely to get the MIT Harvard face mask that's being developed right now that's going to hardly feel like you have a mask on you, and it's going to be clear silicone, and it's going to be N95 capable and reusable, because there's no incentive to go out and make that amazing mask. It's not there. The government is deciding. And once the government has decided, well, no one else cares. But in our situation, in a market economy, we get all this innovation coming in. Someone wants to make a better widget, right? Google wasn't the first one to implement a search engine. They were just the best at it, and it's shown. And they continue to stay the best at it. Facebook wasn't the first social media company. I'm not saying they're the best, but they are the most popular. But there was social media companies before they got into the game. They just did it better than anybody. So, formal definitions here of three major economies: traditional, market, command. And your traditional economy is the one where it's almost like it's almost tribal in the sense where whatever was done in the past is being done now, and it is not very common. I have one example in particular that I'll show you in a second. Market economy is sort of where we are and where most other countries in Europe are, and South America, where the government doesn't have any involvement in economic decisions. Now, we know that's not exactly true, but we have somewhat close to a market economy. A command economy is which the country's government makes all economic decisions regarding what, how, and for whom. So those three economic questions, what, how, and for whom, are answered by the government. And then last, we have what's called a mixed economy. And a mixed economy tends to be a blend of these two. And this is really where we are at right now, and where most countries are, even when they say they're not. So the United States is more of a mixed economy at this point. And here's your best, most recent example. The economy tanks and a recession hits. And in order to stimulate liquidity, which becomes very important in a recession, the Federal Reserve, the government body that controls our money supply in a sense, lowers interest rates that go from bank to bank. So when they do that, short-term interest rates are also lowered, allowing for people to borrow, businesses to borrow more money. This also eventually works its way into the mortgage market. Mortgages actually lower their rates as well. This lowering of the rates is an attempt to stimulate economic activity, because banks can risk more and businesses can lend more money, or not lend, borrow more money with less dollars to actually pay back. It's kind of like a business is buying something, and instead of having a 7% interest rate, they now have a 3 or 4% interest rate, which is a lot better and easier for them to go to business and pay off loans and have large credit cards and so on and so forth. So even in our economy, with that impact from the Fed, they are making a government decision much like a command economy. Hence, our market economy also has some command functions and is really a mixed economy. So, what countries represent these types of economies? Go ahead and pause the video here. See if you can pick a country, and then I'll have some examples. You guys can talk about it in class and see what everybody thinks, and then come back to the video. Alright, and we're back. So what did you guys come up with? Here is a traditional economy, the Inuits of northern Canada. Few communities left that have a traditional economy. Their economy functions based on those traditions. It's tribal. They're still hunting, fishing. They're hunters and gatherers like they were thousands of years ago and have minimal contact with the outside world. Here are some command economies. Now, the USSR is a former command economy. It was the largest at the time, and that was considered the Soviet bloc. And the Soviet government failed for a number of reasons, but the biggest reason was they couldn't pay for anything else. The lack of innovation and then trying to keep up with the military might of the U.S. government actually cratered their entire economy. So North Korea and Cuba are still really command economies. China is a command economy, but has a lot of mixed market forces in there where people can start companies like TikTok and be incredibly successful. So even China, as much as they want to complain that they have a communist government and a command economy, it's not really exactly, they don't have that much control anymore as they used to. So I hope you guys had some good answers here. I thought this was interesting. This is kind of the rest of the world and how gross domestic product compares with everybody else. So, interesting, United States has the largest gross domestic product at 19.39 trillion, and this is a couple years old at this point. And we had about 24.4% of the world's gross domestic product, and that large number in our 330 million people allows us to have such a high standard of living for a good portion of the country. Most of the country lives pretty well relative to other places. Even though India has 2.6 trillion, and that might seem like a lot, they also have 1 billion people. They have more than 3 times as many people as we do. China's the same thing, 12.24 trillion, but they have over 1 billion people as well. So I just thought this was interesting and wanted to show you. And then you can also see the size of this represents the various regions of the world. So Latin America and the Caribbean is just this little itty bitty area over here. And then we have Australia over here. This is Africa, all of the GDP of Africa, which is not much at all. So I just thought this slide was interesting. You can see it all. A lot of these are market countries, market economies, especially in Europe. They have some socialistic flavor to them, but they are still, for the most part, market economies. So, just a different way to look at the world's economies. So what is an economy? Political and economic philosophies. And we're getting to the end here. So capitalism is kind of what we think of, know and love. And you often hear that capitalism is gonna die because of the liberal left, and socialism will take over. And socialism is so bad. And honestly, there is obviously a balance between here that tends to work. And some people think that pure capitalism is the only way to go. Some people think we should redistribute wealth to socialism. We're not really here to have that conversation, just to more understand both of them, and they both have pluses and minuses. Capitalism promotes market competition and private ownership of business. Successful employers and employees prosper. There are still some social services, some government regulations. We flip to the other side of socialism. There's more government involvement in the economy and social services. Tax rates can go up very high. So a place like Canada might have a tax rate of 50-55%. Our highest tax rate right now is 35%, but in Canada they have guaranteed health care. So you kind of have this give and take with the services offered by the government and the tax rate. And the more services, usually the higher the tax rate. Government makes all economic decisions in socialism, whereas in capitalism that would be done by the marketplace. Now, the third side of this is communism. And communism is not driven by elected leaders. It's driven by usually some type of authoritarian group of people that are at the top, and they control all of those factors of production that we talked about earlier. Making the decisions, assigning jobs, and then goods are given to what people need. So you might only have one pair of jeans, and it was given to you by your government. And the downfall to this is there's not really a financial incentive to increase production or productivity, whereas in capitalism, we are focused on doing as much as possible because it benefits you and me. Right? I can work harder and take that money that's made and incentivize myself to do better. Or I can do things like work my butt off at a young age and have kids and decide that, hey, I don't have to work as hard anymore. Maybe I'll go be a teacher. Just a thought. So that is one of the benefits of capitalism. So the last thing we're going to talk about is privatization versus nationalization. So, and this is part of a philosophy, and there's a little bit more to this that we'll go into in a second. But you'll hear of privatizing an industry or nationalizing an industry. In Saudi Arabia, they pretty much have a nationalized oil company where the government owns the oil company. And that is how Saudi Arabia makes most of the money. They essentially sell oil and import dollar money into their country through that. But privatization will have obviously less government because you have private businesses. Nationalization has more government. And that's it for the section for right now. We're going to go a little bit more into privatization versus nationalization in a minute. So, before we wrap up this section, I have a quick video that kind of outlines a little more details about privatization and nationalization, and I'm going to let that run now, and I'll be back after.
To complete Unit 3, we have to look at nationalization and privatization. We'll start with some definitions and examine the advantages and disadvantages of each. The definition of nationalization as provided by Merriam-Webster is a process of transferring private assets into public assets by bringing them under the public ownership of a national government or state. An example would be the government taking control of an industry such as oil, steel, rail, banking, or air. In the 1970s, the British government nationalized British Airlines into British Airways. The advantages include that the government may be able to lower costs by assuming control of the industry. By being the sole owner, the government may be able to exploit economies of scale of production that may otherwise be unachievable. Secondly, the companies could be run to achieve a social purpose and serve society in some way as opposed to focusing on maximizing profit. By operating for the benefit of society, less pressure may exist on earning profits. Thirdly, the government can assume control of key resources and industries of the country. In In China, the government exerts control over the largest banks in the country. However, this allows them to manipulate the financial sector in a way that could benefit the economy. How well they do that is debatable, but that is a topic for another day. On the disadvantaged side, government firms do not face competition and therefore lack an incentive to cut costs. Although they are accountable to the taxpayer, the consequences are not the same as for private firms in competitive industries. The lack of competition could result in less innovation and development emerging from nationalized industries. With little pressure from competition, what need is there to develop new products and respond to changing consumer needs? Additionally, the quality of government-provided goods and services may not be as high as those provided by a competitive private sector. The quantity of goods available may also be restricted, resulting in a reduction of choice for consumers. If you're not sure of this, you're welcome to research North Korea's smart. Finally, in democratic countries where political parties can be in power for a few years or less, industries may be subject to short-termism. As political power changes hands, the direction of nationalized industries may also change. Privatization is defined as the transfer of ownership, property, or business from the government to the private sector. In the late 80s, the UK government then privatized British Airways and floated the stock on the London Stock Exchange, where private individuals and institutions could purchase shares and ownership in the company. As for the advantages of privatization, competition amongst private businesses can lead to a reduction in cost. To maintain profit margins, companies will seek to reduce their operating costs. Additionally, as was the case with British Airways, once a nationalized industry is privatized, private individuals and institutions are able to take part ownership. This allows them to share in the profits generated by these firms. The competitive landscape for private firms could also give rise to an increase in the quantity and quality of products available. Private firms will release new products to keep and gain customers, and in doing so may increase the quality of output to gain a competitive advantage in the marketplace. There is one-off benefit to the government of the revenue generated from the sale of nationalized assets. However, in the future, the government will no longer generate revenue from those assets. Another disadvantage would be the possibility of a private firm obtaining monopoly power. Without government regulation, the firm could exploit consumers. Finally, by focusing on profit maximizing, firms may have little incentive to serve social objectives. Their primary concern will be generating profit with less focus on overall social welfare. Alright, this wraps up Unit 3. We're getting through the AS, and we've finished the microeconomic portion of this course. We'll next move on to Unit 4, the macroeconomy. As we progress, be sure to leave...
Alright, that's going to wrap up our section 3.1. We'll do 3.2 next Monday, and we'll also probably have a test next week on Chapter 3. Like I said, that'll be it for our kind of foundation courses, and you'll be good to go. Thanks for listening. Have a good day. This is posted online, and I'll talk to you soon.